The midnight sky blazed with 1,000 stars as Nora Clarke clutched her father's pocket watch, the last remnant of her former life in Boston. The stagecoach rattled beneath her, every jolt threatening to send her bouncing off the worn leather seat as it raced through the rugged Arizona territory of 1878. 2 days prior, she'd never imagined herself fleeing west with nothing but a small trunk of possessions and the desperate hope that her late uncle's ranch might offer refuge from her family's sudden financial ruin. Whoa there! The driver's voice called from above as the coach lurched violently. The horse's panicked whinnies pierced the night air. Nora braced herself against the window frame as the other passengers, an elderly minister and a traveling salesman, were thrown forward. The vehicle tilted precariously, and through the window she caught sight of what had startled the horses. Flames engulfing a small homestead in the distance, silhouettes of mounted men circling the burning structure. "Raiders," the salesman whispered, his face ashen in the moonlight. "Driver." "Keep moving." But it was too late. The stagecoach skidded to a halt as riders materialized from the darkness surrounding them. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs as rough voices shouted commands. The door wrenched open, and a bearded man with a bandana covering half his face pointed a revolver inside. "Step out nice and slow. Valuables in a pile. Anyone tries anything heroic." He left the threat unfinished but patted his gun meaningfully. Trembling, Nora clutched her reticule containing her meager savings as she descended. The night air felt suddenly cold against her skin. 4 mounted men circled them like wolves, while 2 others held the driver at gunpoint. "Please," the minister began. "We have women present." "Shut your mouth, old man," the leader snarled, dismounting. His eyes fell on Nora, and a slow smile spread beneath his bandana. "Well now, what do we have here?" A shot cracked through the night, startling everyone. One of the mounted raiders cried out, clutching his shoulder before tumbling from his saddle. "That's far enough, boys." The voice came from the darkness beyond the road, deep and steady. "I'm thinking you might want to reconsider your evening plans." A tall figure emerged from the shadows, a Winchester rifle held with casual confidence. He wore a dust-covered duster over trail-worn clothes, his face partially obscured by the brim of a weather-beaten hat. Even in the dim light, Nora could see his eyes steely and unwavering as they assessed the situation. "This ain't your concern, stranger," the leader growled, though Nora noticed his gun hand trembled slightly. "I'm making it my concern." The newcomer stepped closer, his movements measured and deliberate. "Now, you boys have about 10 seconds to mount up and disappear before I decide these folks need some peace and quiet." The leader hesitated, clearly calculating odds. The wounded raider moaned on the ground while the others exchanged nervous glances. Finally, with a curse, he backed toward his horse. "This ain't finished. For tonight it is," the stranger replied. The raiders retreated, taking their wounded companion with them. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Nora released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The stranger approached, rifle now held loosely at his side. In the moonlight, she could see him more clearly, perhaps 30 years old, with several days' stubble darkening his jawline and eyes that had seen more than their fair share of trouble. "You folks all right?" he asked, gaze sweeping over the shaken passengers. "Thanks to you," the driver called down. "Might have lost more than valuables tonight if you hadn't shown up, mister." The stranger nodded once. "Name's Lucas Xavier. I was tracking those raiders when I spotted your coach." His eyes landed on Nora, lingering for a moment. "Where you headed?" "Copper Creek," she answered, voice steadier than she expected. "My uncle's ranch, or what was his ranch. He passed recently." Something flickered across Lucas's face. "Jacob Clarke's place?" Nora blinked in surprise. "Yes, he was my uncle. Did you know him?" "Every rancher in these parts knew Jacob," Lucas replied, a hint of respect in his tone. "Good man, fair even when others weren't." He glanced at the sky. "Copper Creek's still a half-day's ride. Those raiders might circle back once they lick their wounds. I'd suggest you folks continue on to the way station at Sycamore Springs. It's about an hour ahead. You can get fresh horses and continue in daylight." The driver nodded agreement. "That's good sense. If you're headed that way, Mr. Xavier, I'd welcome your company on the road." Lucas seemed to consider for a moment before nodding. I'll ride alongside. Make sure you get there safely. As they prepared to continue their journey, Lucas approached Nora. Miss Clarke, I'm sorry about your uncle. If you're planning to stay at his ranch, you should know things have changed in Copper Creek since he passed. What do you mean? Nora asked, a fresh worry settling in her stomach. The railroads coming through, land suddenly valuable. There are people who have been trying to claim portions of your uncle's property since before he was in the ground. His expression was unreadable. Just thought you should be prepared. Nora squared her shoulders. Thank you for the warning, Mr. Xavier. But that ranch is all I have left in this world, and I intend to make it work. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I believe you might at that, Miss Clarke. When they reached Sycamore Springs an hour later, the small way station was a welcome sight. The building was rustic but sturdy, oil lamps casting a warm glow through its windows. Inside, they found a handful of other travelers waiting out the night, along with the station master, a rotund man named Wilkins who greeted them with suspicious eyes that softened at the sight of Lucas. Xavier. Been months since you passed through. He nodded toward an empty table. Got stew on if you're hungry. As they settled at the rough-hewn table, Nora studied Lucas covertly. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to danger, yet there was a gentleness in how he spoke to the elderly minister, ensuring the man had the most comfortable chair available. You know this area well? Nora asked as Wilkins placed bowls of steaming stew before them. Lucas nodded. Worked most of the big ranches around here at one time or another. Been driving my own small herd the past few years. A cattle driver becoming a hero, Nora mused. It's like something from a dime novel. He chuckled, the sound warming something inside her. Hardly a hero, Miss Clarke, just happened to be in the right place. Nora, she corrected. And regardless of what you call it, Mr. Xavier, we owe you our lives. Lucas, he returned, meeting her gaze. And consider the debt paid if you'll tell me what brings a Boston lady to the Arizona territory. Your accent gives you away, he added at her surprised look. Nora hesitated, then decided honesty was the simplest path. My father's shipping company collapsed after a series of storms destroyed most of our vessels. The creditors took everything. He couldn't face the shame. Her voice caught. He took his own life 2 months ago. Uncle Jacob had written years ago offering me a place if I ever needed one. I never thought I'd take him up on it, but here I am. Lucas's expression softened. I'm sorry about your father, loss like that. It stays with you. Something in his tone suggested personal understanding. Before Nora could respond, Wilkins approached their table. Got a problem, Xavier, the station master said in a low voice. Messenger just rode in from Copper Creek, says Thornton's men are watching the roads. Word is they're looking for Jacob Clarke's heir. Lucas's face hardened. Henry Thornton, the same. Seems he's determined to get that water rights agreement he's been after. Figures with Jacob gone, he can pressure whoever inherits into signing. Nora's spoon clattered against her bowl. Water rights. Lucas turned to her. Your uncle's ranch sits on the only reliable water source for miles around. The Crawley Creek runs through the heart of the property. Thornton's been trying to gain control of it for years to support his mining operations. But surely there are laws still catching up out here, Lucas interrupted gently. Men like Thornton tend to make their own rules until someone stops them. Nora straightened her spine. Well, I have no intention of selling my uncle's legacy to some bully. Lucas studied her, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. It won't be that simple. Thornton doesn't ask nicely, and from what Wilkins is saying, he knows you're coming. So what do I do? Turn around and go back to nothing? No, Lucas said after a moment. We find another way to get you to your property. He turned to Wilkins. I'll need supplies for a few days, and can you get word to Sam Miller that I'll be needing those horses I left with him? Wilkins nodded and hurried away. Lucas turned back to Nora. There's a trail through the high country. It's rougher going, but it avoids the main roads where Thornton's men will be watching. I can guide you there. Why would you do that for me? Nora asked, genuinely perplexed. You don't even know me. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. I knew your uncle. He gave me work when others wouldn't. Said he believed a man's past wasn't as important as what he chose to do with his future. He met her gaze steadily. Consider it repaying an old debt. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Nora had traded her traveling dress for the practical riding clothes. She'd packed divided skirts that allowed her to sit astride a horse properly. The other passengers continued on with the stagecoach, while Nora found herself mounting a spirited chestnut Mayor Lucas had procured. "Her name's Penny," he explained, adjusting Nora's stirrups. "She's sure-footed in rough country." His hands were calloused but gentle as they brushed against her ankle. "You ride much in Boston?" "Every Sunday in the park," Nora replied with a small smile. "Though I suspect that's quite different from where we're headed." "Just stay close and follow my lead," he said, swinging onto his own mount, a powerful black gelding. "It's about 3 days to your uncle's place if we take the mountain route." They rode out as the sun climbed higher, leaving the small settlement behind. Lucas set a steady pace, occasionally glancing back to check on her. The landscape changed as they rode, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with scrub brush and the occasional juniper. By midday, they were climbing into true mountain country, the air growing cooler as they ascended. "How did you learn about this trail?" Nora asked during a brief rest to water the horses at a small spring. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back from his forehead. "Spent some time with the Apache when I first came west. They taught me there's always more than one way to get somewhere if you're willing to look." "You lived with the Apache?" Nora couldn't hide her surprise. A shadow crossed his face. "For a time. After the war, I didn't fit anywhere else." "You fought in the war between the states?" she asked softly. He nodded once. "Union cavalry. I was barely 18 when I enlisted, 21 when it ended." His eyes held memories he clearly preferred not to share. "The fighting was over, but I couldn't go home. Too many ghosts." Nora thought of her own ghosts, her father's vacant eyes the last time she'd seen him alive, her mother's grave back in Massachusetts, the life she'd once expected to lead now forever beyond reach. "I understand ghosts," she said simply. Lucas studied her face, as if seeing something new there. After a moment, he nodded. "I believe you do." They continued their journey, the trail growing steeper and narrower. Nora's muscles protested the unaccustomed riding, but she gritted her teeth against the discomfort. As the sun began its descent, Lucas led them into a sheltered hollow where a small stream gurgled over rocks. "We'll camp here tonight," he announced, dismounting. "There's good water and enough cover to hide our fire." While Lucas tended to the horses, Nora gathered what firewood she could find. Her city upbringing hadn't prepared her for frontier survival, but she was determined not to be helpless. By the time Lucas returned, she had assembled a respectable pile of kindling and larger branches. "Impressive," he commented, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I'm a quick study," she replied, unable to suppress a proud smile. "Though I'll admit I have no idea how to actually start the fire." Lucas chuckled and knelt beside the arrangement, expertly building a small teepee of kindling before striking a match. Within minutes, a cheerful blaze illuminated their campsite. From his saddlebags, he produced coffee, jerky, and hardtack, not the most appealing meal Nora had ever seen. But her hunger made it welcome. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped rapidly. Nora huddled closer to the fire, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Here," Lucas said, offering his duster. "Desert nights get cold." "I couldn't, you'll freeze," she protested. "I've slept in worse conditions," he assured her. When she still hesitated, he added softly, "Please. My mother raised me better than to stay warm while a lady shivers." She accepted the coat, surprised by its weight and the lingering warmth from his body. "Thank you. Where is your mother now?" "Gone," he said simply. "Farm outside of St. Louis. Influenza took her and my sister while I was away fighting." "I'm sorry," Nora whispered. "My mother died when I was 14. Consumption." Lucas nodded, understanding passing between them without need for further words. They sat in companionable silence as the fire crackled and stars appeared overhead, more brilliant than Nora had ever seen them. "It's beautiful," she murmured, gazing upward. "One of the few things I never tire of out here," Lucas agreed. "Makes a man feel small, but not in a bad way, just reminds you there's something bigger than all our troubles." Nora studied his profile in the firelight, strong jaw, straight nose, eyes that reflected the flames. There was a steadiness to him that called to something inside her, something that had been adrift since her father's death. "What will you do after you've delivered me to my uncle's ranch?" she asked. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks skyward. "Head back to my place, I suppose. Got a small spread about 30 miles east of Copper Creek. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. You have your own ranch." "Calling it a ranch might be generous," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "100 acres, 30 head of cattle, and a cabin that leaks when it rains, but it's the first thing I've owned outright since the war." Nora found herself wondering what his home looked like, trying to picture this solitary man in his own space. "It sounds wonderful." His eyes met hers across the fire, a flicker of surprise in them before he looked away. "You should get some rest. We've got hard riding ahead tomorrow." She nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate their conversation had become. Lucas arranged her bedroll close to the fire but maintained a respectful distance with his own. As she lay down, wrapped in his coat and her blanket, Nora found her thoughts lingering on her mysterious protector and the complex man beneath the stoic exterior. The next day brought more challenging terrain as they climbed higher into the mountains. Nora's muscles screamed in protest, but she refused to complain. By midday, they'd reached a ridgeline that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. "That's Copper Creek," Lucas pointed to a distant ribbon of green winding through the otherwise brown landscape. "Your uncle's ranch covers most of the eastern section of the valley. Good grazing land with reliable water." Nora squinted against the sunlight, trying to imagine her new home. "It looks so vast. I can't believe one person could own so much land." "Your uncle worked his whole life for it," Lucas replied. "Started with nothing and built one of the most respected operations in the territory. People around here still talk about his first cattle drive took 100 head through Apache territory during the worst of the conflicts. Made it through by trading fairly with the tribal leaders when other ranchers were still shooting on sight." Admiration colored his words, and Nora felt a swell of pride for the uncle she'd barely known. "I wish I'd had the chance to know him better." "He'd be proud knowing his land passed to someone with your spirit," Lucas said, then looked almost embarrassed at the personal observation. They continued along the ridge for several hours before beginning their descent. The trail narrowed dramatically at one point, hugging a cliff face with a sheer drop to their right. Nora's heart hammered as Penny picked her way carefully along the path. "We're almost through the worst of it," Lucas called back encouragingly. "Just stay." His words were cut short by the sound of falling rock above them. Nora looked up in alarm to see several boulders tumbling down the mountainside directly toward them. "Ride," Lucas shouted, spurring his horse forward. Nora urged Penny to follow, but the frightened mare reared instead, nearly sending Nora over the edge. She clung desperately to the saddle horn as more rocks clattered down around them. One struck the path just behind Penny's hooves, causing part of the trail to crumble away. "Lucas." Nora cried as she felt the horse losing footing. In an instant, he was beside her, having somehow turned his mount in the narrow space. He reached across, grabbing Penny's bridle to steady her. "I'm scared," Nora gasped, seeing the yawning drop just inches from the horse's back hooves. "Then hold on tight and don't let go," Lucas commanded, his voice steady despite the danger. "I've got you." With remarkable skill, he guided both horses forward, inch by precarious inch, until they reached a wider section of trail. Only when they were safely away from the edge did Nora realize she was trembling violently. Lucas dismounted and helped her from the saddle, his hands strong and sure. Her legs buckled as they touched ground, and he caught her against his chest. "You're all right," he murmured, his arms encircling her. "I've got you." Nora clutched at his shirt, face pressed against the solid warmth of him as her terror slowly subsided. She became aware of his heartbeat, rapid but strong, and the gentle pressure of his hand on her back. "That wasn't natural," Lucas said after a moment, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "Those rocks were pushed." Nora pulled back slightly to look up at him. "You mean someone tried to? I can't be sure, but it seems likely." His expression was grim as he scanned the cliffs above. "Thornton's men might have found our trail." "What do we do?" Lucas's jaw tightened. "We keep moving, but more carefully, and we don't make camp until we're well away from here." They rode until well after dark, following deer paths and dry creek beds where they would leave minimal tracks. When they finally stopped, Lucas insisted on a cold camp no fire that might give away their position. They ate a cheerless meal of jerky and hardtack in the moonlight, speaking little. Nora couldn't stop thinking about how close they'd come to disaster and how instinctively Lucas had put himself between her and danger. "You could have been killed today," she said finally. "Trying to save me." Lucas looked up from checking his rifle. "So could you? But you barely know me." "Why risk your life?" He was silent for a long moment. "Some things a man just doesn't need a reason." "I think you have a reason for everything you do, Lucas Xavier," Nora said softly. In the silvery moonlight, she saw something flicker across his face, vulnerability quickly masked. "Get some sleep, Nora. We need to move at first light." The night passed uneventfully, though Nora slept fitfully, starting awake at every sound from the surrounding wilderness. When dawn came, they set off immediately, Lucas leading them through increasingly dense forest. By midday, the trees began to thin, and Lucas signaled for them to stop at the edge of the tree line. Below stretched rolling grassland that eventually gave way to the broader valley floor. "That's Clarke Ranch," Lucas said, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled against the distant foothills. "We'll approach from behind the north ridge, less chance of being spotted that way." As they prepared to continue, the distant crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. Lucas immediately pulled Nora deeper into the cover of the trees. "Hunters?" she asked hopefully. Lucas shook his head, expression grave. "That came from the direction of your ranch." He retrieved a small spyglass from his saddlebag and studied the distant buildings. "There's movement around the main house, riders, at least 6 of them. Thornton's men," Nora's heart sank, "most likely. They must be getting impatient waiting for you to arrive." He collapsed the spyglass with a sharp movement. "We need to get down there, but not by charging straight in. There's a foreman's cabin on the north side of the property where your uncle's man, Martinez, lives. If he's still there, he might be able to tell us what we're facing." They took a circuitous route, staying within cover whenever possible. By late afternoon, they approached a small cabin partially hidden by a stand of cottonwoods. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting occupancy. Lucas motioned for Nora to stay back as he approached cautiously, rifle ready. He knocked a distinctive pattern on the door. After a tense moment, it opened a crack. "Xavier." A weathered face appeared. "Dios mío, I thought you were one of Thornton's dogs come back." "Martinez," Lucas greeted him with evident relief. "Good to see you're still here. This is Miss Clarke, Jacob's niece from back east." The door opened fully, revealing a lean, silver-haired man whose face lit up at the sight of Nora. "Señorita Clarke, your uncle spoke of you often. Please, come inside quickly before you are seen." The cabin was small but meticulously kept. Martinez ushered them to a rough-hewn table while his wife, Elena, a tiny woman with kind eyes, immediately began preparing food. "Thornton's men have been watching the roads for days," Martinez explained, pouring coffee. "This morning they grew tired of waiting and rode to the main house. They claimed Señor Clarke owed Thornton money and that the ranch should be forfeit." "That's absurd," Nora protested. "My uncle's letter said the ranch was free and clear." "It is," Martinez confirmed. "Thornton is lying, but he has brought men with guns to support his lies. They have taken over the main house and are holding 3 of our ranch hands in the barn." "How many men total?" Lucas asked. 8 that I have seen. Thornton himself arrived this morning." Lucas's expression darkened. "Thornton came personally. That's unusual. He usually sends his foreman to do his dirty work. He says he wishes to be present when the new owner arrives to negotiate the water rights." Martinez's tone made clear what kind of negotiation Thornton had in mind. "We need the law," Nora insisted. Martinez shook his head sadly. "The sheriff is 3 days' ride away in the county seat, and Thornton, he has friends there." Lucas pushed back from the table, his decision apparently made. "Martinez, is the old tunnel still accessible?" "Señor Xavier. Elena and I cleared it last winter when Thornton first began making threats after your uncle's passing." "Tunnel," Nora looked between them. "Your uncle was a cautious man," Lucas explained. "During the Apache raids 10 years ago, he built an escape tunnel from the main house cellar that comes out near the creek bed. Martinez and I helped dig it. It was filled in after the troubles passed, Martinez added, but when Thornton began causing problems, I thought it wise to reopen it. Lucas nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Now, here's what we're going to do. Martinez, ride to Sam Miller's place and then to the Johnsons'. Tell them Thornton's making his move on Clarke land. They've been worried they'd be next they'll come. Elena, can you get word to some of the other hands who aren't at the main house? Elena nodded firmly. Pablo and the others are hiding in the line shack on the East Range. They will come if called. Good. Nora and I will use the tunnel to get into the house. Once inside, we can free the ranch hands and be ready when you bring help. That's your plan? Nora asked, alarmed. Just the two of us against 8 armed men. Lucas met her gaze steadily. We'll have surprise on our side. And I don't intend to fight them all, just create enough confusion to get Thornton alone. The man's a coward at heart. If we can separate him from his hired guns, he'll fold. Nora considered this, heart racing. And if he doesn't? Something dangerous flickered in Lucas's eyes. Then we do this the hard way. They waited until nightfall. Elena provided Nora with a simpler dress and shawl to replace her riding clothes, explaining that if they were seen, she would look more like one of the Mexican women who worked at the ranch. Martinez departed to gather allies while Lucas prepared their weapons, his rifle, a revolver for each of them, and a wicked-looking hunting knife. Have you ever fired a gun? He asked as he showed Nora how to load the revolver. No, she admitted, handling the weapon gingerly. It's simple enough. Point and pull the trigger. But it's a last resort, understand. Stay close to me, and with luck, you won't need to use it. Elena packed them food and filled canteens before guiding them to the tunnel entrance, cleverly hidden beneath a false floor in her root cellar. It is not a pleasant journey, she warned, holding a lantern over the dark opening. Nearly half a mile and in some places very narrow. We'll manage, Lucas assured her. If all goes well, we'll see you by morning with Thornton's men gone. Elena crossed herself. God go with you both. The tunnel was everything Elena had warned: damp, narrow, and oppressively dark. They crawled in places where the ceiling had partially collapsed, and twice they had to clear minor cave-ins. Nora's skirts became sodden with mud, but she pressed on without complaint, drawing strength from Lucas's steady presence ahead of her. After what felt like hours, they reached a ladder leading upward. Lucas extinguished their lantern and listened carefully before pushing against the trapdoor above. It opened silently into a wine cellar beneath the main house. Your uncle was particular about his wine, Lucas whispered with a hint of amusement. Used to order it special from California. The unexpected glimpse into her uncle's life touched Nora deeply. I wish I'd known him better. Lucas squeezed her hand briefly in the darkness. He would have liked you. You have his determination. They crept up the cellar stairs, pausing at the door that led to the kitchen. Lucas listened, then eased it open slightly. The kitchen was empty but illuminated by a single oil lamp. Voices and occasional laughter drifted from elsewhere in the house. Sounds like they're in the main parlor, Lucas whispered. Probably celebrating their theft early. He glanced at Nora. Stay close behind me. If anything happens, get back to the tunnel. She nodded, gripping the revolver tightly. They slipped into the kitchen and moved silently toward the hallway beyond. The house was well built, with polished wooden floors and substantial furniture, clearly the home of a successful rancher. Family portraits hung on the walls, and Nora was startled to recognize her father's features in one of the older images. These were her people, her heritage, and strangers had invaded it. Anger replaced her fear, straightening her spine as they approached the parlor door, which stood partially ajar. Through the gap, she could see several men lounging on her uncle's furniture, drinking his whiskey. A distinguished-looking man with silver at his temples stood by the fireplace, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. Thornton, Lucas breathed, barely audible. He motioned for Nora to wait as he peered more carefully into the room, counting occupants. Just then, a floorboard creaked beneath Nora's foot. The conversation in the parlor stopped abruptly. Check that, Thornton's voice commanded. Lucas pushed Nora back toward the kitchen as heavy footsteps approached the door. They barely made it around the corner before a burly man with a revolver stepped into the hallway. Probably just the house settling, he called back after a cursory glance. Check the kitchen anyway, Thornton ordered. Can't be too careful. Lucas pulled Nora into a small pantry as the man lumbered toward the kitchen. They pressed themselves against the wall, scarcely daring to breathe as he passed within feet of their hiding place. When his footsteps receded, Lucas leaned close to Nora's ear. New plan, he whispered. They're too spread out, we need to draw them together. How a grim smile touched his lips. A diversion. He reached into his pocket and produced a small tin of matches. When I signal, run for the cellar. Get to the tunnel and don't stop until you reach Martinez's cabin. I'm not leaving you, she protested. I'll be right behind you. Trust me. Before she could argue further, he slipped from the pantry and disappeared down a side corridor. Nora waited anxiously, heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. Minutes passed like hours until suddenly a crash came from the far side of the house, followed by shouting. Fire! Backside of the house is burning, someone yelled. Footsteps thundered as men rushed toward the commotion. Through the pantry door, Nora saw Thornton himself hurry past, barking orders. This was her chance. She darted into the now empty hallway and ran for the kitchen. Just as she reached the cellar door, a voice stopped her cold. Well now, what have we here? She turned to find a lean man with a pockmarked face blocking her path, pistol aimed directly at her. Mr. Thornton will be mighty interested to meet Jacob Clarke's niece. Nora raised her own revolver, but her hand trembled violently. The man laughed. You even know how to use that, city girl. A gunshot rang out, and the man crumpled with a cry of pain, clutching his shoulder. Lucas stood in the doorway behind him, smoke still curling from his revolver barrel. She might not, he said coldly, but I do. He grabbed the fallen man's gun and tossed it aside before taking Nora's arm. Come on, they'll have heard that. Instead of heading for the cellar, Lucas guided her toward the front of the house. They'll expect us to run. We're going to turn this around. They reached the main entryway, just as Thornton and two of his men returned from investigating the diversion. The rancher's eyes widened at the sight of them, Lucas with his gun trained steadily, Nora beside him with newfound determination in her stance. Xavier, Thornton growled. Should have known you'd be involved in this. Evening, Henry, Lucas replied conversationally. I see you're making yourself at home on someone else's property. That seems to be a habit with you. The two men flanking Thornton reached for their weapons, but Lucas shook his head. I wouldn't. My trigger finger gets mighty twitchy when people make sudden moves. What do you want? Thornton demanded. I want you and your men off this land, Nora spoke up, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. This ranch belongs to me legally and rightfully, and you are trespassing. Thornton's eyebrows rose. Miss Clarke, I presume? I was simply ensuring the property was protected until your arrival. Your uncle left significant debts. My uncle owed you nothing, Nora interrupted, and I will never sell you the water rights. Not now, not ever. You'll find it difficult to run a ranch this size alone, Miss Clarke, Thornton said, his tone becoming silkier. Especially with certain obstacles that might arise, cattle that mysteriously disappear, ranch hands who find better opportunities elsewhere. Are you threatening me, Mr. Thornton? Nora asked coldly, merely pointing out realities of ranching in this territory. Lucas took a step forward. Here's a reality for you, Henry. Miss Clarke isn't alone. She has friends including me. Something in his tone made Thornton study him more carefully. You're bluffing, Xavier. You've got a small spread that barely supports you. What's your stake in this? Before Lucas could answer, the front door burst open behind them. Martinez stood there with Sam Miller and 4 other ranchers, all armed and looking grimly determined. He's not the only friend Miss Clarke has, Miller announced, leveling his shotgun at Thornton. Word travels fast when a snake like you makes a move, Henry. Thornton's face flushed with anger, but Nora could see the calculation in his eyes. He was outnumbered now, and he knew it. This isn't over, he said finally. There are legal channels which you're welcome to pursue, Nora cut in. But in the meantime, you and your men will leave my property immediately. For a tense moment, Thornton seemed ready to resist, then his shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. Boys, gather your things. Seems our welcome has worn thin. Within 30 minutes, Thornton and his men had mounted up and ridden away, though not before Thornton delivered a final venomous glare at Lucas and Nora. The neighboring ranchers stayed long enough to ensure they were truly gone before departing as well. each offering Nora their welcome to the territory and assurances of assistance if needed. When they had all gone, Nora found herself standing on the front porch of what was now truly her home, watching the sun begin to rise over the distant mountains. Lucas joined her, leaning against the porch rail. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but Thornton doesn't give up easily." "Neither do I," Nora replied. She turned to face him. "Why did you help me? The truth this time." Lucas was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Your uncle saved my life once. Not just by giving me work when others wouldn't, though that was part of it. I came west with nothing but nightmares and a drinking problem after the war, drifted for years, taking whatever jobs would keep whiskey in my canteen." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture somehow vulnerable. "I was working for Thornton back, then didn't care who signed my pay as long as they paid. He ordered me and some others to burn out a small Mexican family who'd settled on land he wanted. I refused. His men beat me half to death and left me in the desert to die." Nora's hand found his arm and he glanced down at it before continuing. "Your uncle found me, brought me here, nursed me back to health, told me every man deserves a second chance to be better than his worst decisions." A small, sad smile touched his lips. "He helped me get sober, taught me ranching, eventually helped me buy my own small place. So when I heard his niece was coming to claim his ranch and that Thornton was plotting, I had to make sure you got here safely. I owed him that." "You've more than repaid that debt," Nora said softly. Lucas shook his head. "Some debts can never be fully repaid. Then perhaps they become something else entirely." She stepped closer to him. "Something that looks forward instead of back." His eyes met hers, searching. "What are you saying, Nora?" "I'm saying that I have a large ranch to run and very little idea how to do it. I need someone who knows the land, the cattle, the people." She took a deep breath. "I need a partner, Lucas, someone I can trust." Surprise registered on his face, followed by uncertainty. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're honorable, brave, and skilled. I know you keep your word. I know that when I said I was scared, you told me to hold on tight and not let go, and you didn't let me fall." Her voice softened. "The rest I'm willing to learn over time." Lucas was silent for so long that Nora began to fear she'd misread him entirely. Then slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Ranching is hard work in the best of times, and with Thornton against us, I'm not afraid of hard work," she interrupted. "And Thornton doesn't frighten me nearly as much as the thought of facing all this alone." A smile, the first full, unguarded one she'd seen, transformed his face. "Then I accept your offer, Miss Clarke, partner." The way he said the word made it clear he understood it might someday mean more than a business arrangement. Nora found herself hoping it would. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the valley that was now her home, Nora Clarke knew with certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would not face them alone. Sometimes, she reflected, the longest journeys led exactly where you needed to be, even when you didn't know you were looking for it. Lucas's hand remained wrapped around hers, strong and steady, a promise of protection, of partnership, and perhaps, given time, of love.